Bruce Lee arrived in America a poor immigrant, but rich in talent. He set his sights on the Hollywood dream.
Today we return to Seattle's Lakeview Cemetery to visit the gravesite of screen legend and martial arts icon Bruce Lee.
His sudden death shocked the world, and his gravesite became a symbol of peace and remembrance. For over 50 years, Bruce Lee's tomb remained untouched, a quiet place where fans came to honor his legacy. But in 2025, during what was supposed to be routine maintenance, workers made a discovery no one expected. Beneath the stone lay a hidden truth, one that would reignite global fascination and stir emotions all over again. What did they find inside Bruce Lee's tomb? Let's find out. How it all began. Before Bruce Lee became an icon, a fighter, or a film star, he was a restless teenager navigating the crowded streets of Hong Kong, already throwing punches at the world long before the world knew his name. That early fire, raw and untamed, would become the foundation of a legacy that changed everything: martial arts, cinema, and the way the East and West saw each other. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco in 1940 during his father's Chinese opera tour, but his roots were firmly planted in Hong Kong. Named Lee Junfan, or Return Again, he was a child of two worlds from the beginning. Growing up in post-war Hong Kong meant learning to fend for oneself, often physically. By his teenage years, Bruce was already a skilled street fighter, sharp with his fists and even sharper with his mind. This raw talent found discipline when he began training under Wing Chun Grandmaster Ip Man. In that studio, Bruce absorbed more than martial arts techniques. He began shaping a personal philosophy that prized flexibility, efficiency, and continuous self-expression. At 18, after a series of street fights and concerns over his safety, Bruce returned to the United States. He arrived in Seattle with barely any money, but carried with him a drive that refused to be ignored. He enrolled at the University of Washington, studied philosophy, and opened his first martial arts school. What set Bruce apart wasn't just his technique, it was who he chose to teach. In a time when martial arts were often kept behind closed cultural doors, Bruce welcomed everyone, regardless of race or background. That decision ruffled feathers in traditional circles, but it also laid the groundwork for something revolutionary. Blending Wing Chun with boxing, fencing, and his own ideas about combat and movement, Bruce developed Jeet Kune Do, his personal expression of martial arts. It wasn't just a fighting style, it was a rejection of rigid form. Absorb what is useful, he would later write, discard what is not. Hollywood eventually came calling. Cast as Kato in The Green Hornet, Bruce turned a supporting role into a cultural phenomenon, so much so that in some countries, the show was literally renamed The Kato Show. But Hollywood wasn't ready for a Chinese leading man. Frustrated with typecasting and racism, Bruce returned to Hong Kong, where he took control of his destiny. He wrote, directed, choreographed, and starred in a string of hits like Fist of Fury and Enter the Dragon. Films that didn't just showcase his skill, they shattered cultural barriers and box office records worldwide. Tragically, Bruce Lee died in 1973 at just 32 years old, with the full height of his vision still ahead of him. But what he left behind, his teachings, his philosophy, and his films, only grew stronger with time. And in 2025, when his tomb was reopened for the first time in decades, the world would come to learn that his story was far from over. The day the world mourned. Few celebrity deaths have ever sparked as much confusion, suspicion, and sorrow as that of Bruce Lee. When news broke on July 20th, 1973, that the 32-year-old martial arts icon had died suddenly in Hong Kong, the world struggled to process it. He wasn't just a rising movie star, he was a cultural force, a symbol of strength and discipline, gone in a flash at the peak of his career. And it wasn't just the loss that stunned people, it was how little anyone understood about what had really happened. That day, Bruce had been in an apartment belonging to actress Betty Ting Pei, reportedly reviewing a script for Game of Death. At some point, he complained of a headache. Ting gave him a common painkiller. What happened next is still debated. Bruce lay down for a rest and never got up. Paramedics rushed him to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but he was declared dead that same evening. The official cause, according to a coroner's report released in September of that year, was cerebral edema, fluid swelling in the brain, likely brought on by an adverse reaction to the painkiller. No autopsy was performed, which was standard practice in Hong Kong at the time for cases without clear signs of foul play. But for many, that explanation fell short. Almost immediately, rumors took over. Some believed the triads, Hong Kong's notorious organized crime groups, had something to do with it. Bruce had refused to play by their rules. Was that enough to get him silenced? Others suspected poisoning or a reaction to cannabis found in his system, though doctors said it wasn't enough to be lethal. An inquest later that year supported the medical report, ruling out foul play. Still, the mystery endured. How could someone in peak physical condition collapse so suddenly without warning? The grief was overwhelming. In Hong Kong, tens of thousands filled the streets in mourning. Around the world, tributes poured in from fans and friends alike. His wife, Linda Lee, stood at the center of it all, heartbroken but composed, making sure her husband received the honor he deserved. Bruce was laid to rest in Seattle, where his tomb became a place of pilgrimage for generations seeking clarity, strength, or a bit of inspiration. And then, in 2025, that tomb was quietly opened. What was supposed to be simple maintenance turned into something else entirely. The mystery surrounding Bruce Lee's final hours had never really been buried, and the world was now watching closely again. A resting place in Seattle. Of all the places Bruce Lee could have been laid to rest, few expected his final resting place to be a quiet cemetery in Seattle.
Bruce Lee is located here in Seattle. He started his first philosophy school here, so it's a pretty big deal.
Hong Kong, the city where his stardom exploded and where millions considered him a national hero, seemed like the obvious choice. But for Linda Lee Cadwell, his widow, the decision wasn't about public expectation. It was about personal truth. Seattle wasn't just where Bruce had once lived. It was where his journey truly began. Years before the fame, the magazine covers, and the film deals, Bruce was just a determined young man trying to share his vision of martial arts. It was in Seattle that he opened his first school, taught students from all backgrounds, and refined the philosophies that would later become Jeet Kune Do. It was also the city where he met Linda, fell in love, and started the life they were still building when tragedy struck. In an interview shortly after his death, Linda explained that Seattle held their most meaningful memories. It was where Bruce built a future based on inclusion, discipline, and self-expression, and that made it the most fitting place for him to rest. On July 31st, 1973, just days after Bruce's sudden passing, a private ceremony was held at Lakeview Cemetery. Located in the peaceful hills overlooking Lake Washington, the location was chosen for its quiet dignity. Friends and colleagues, including James Coburn and Steve McQueen, gathered in silence as Bruce was laid to rest in a grave marked by a polished granite headstone. The design combined Eastern and Western influences, just like Bruce himself. Chinese characters sat beside English text, including one of his most famous quotes: "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering." Over the decades, the gravesite became more than a memorial. It turned into a sacred destination for fans, martial artists, and thinkers from around the world. Visitors left flowers, handwritten letters, nunchaku, and notes scrawled with personal stories of how Bruce had changed their lives. For many, it wasn't just a tomb, it was a classroom, a shrine, a source of strength. And so, when the site was scheduled for routine maintenance in 2025, it was more than just a logistical update. The world paused. What had remained undisturbed for 52 years was about to be opened, and no one knew what might be waiting inside. If Bruce's resting place still moves people to tears and reflection half a century later, it speaks volumes about the life he lived. If this story resonates with you, give it a like, and let Bruce's legacy continue to ripple through time. The Social Trailblazer. Long before the world saw him as a film icon or martial arts legend, Bruce Lee was quietly breaking down barriers that most didn't dare challenge. At a time when race dictated opportunity and cultural gatekeeping was the norm, Bruce refused to accept limits, especially those built on prejudice. His most lasting impact may not be confined to cinema or combat, but in how he helped redefine who belonged and who had a voice. In the early 1960s, martial arts in America were still masked in tradition and often reserved for closed ethnic circles. It was widely understood that Chinese martial arts should be passed down only to other Chinese. Bruce Lee didn't just ignore that rule, he openly defied it. At his first school in Seattle's Chinatown, he welcomed students regardless of race, background, or experience. Jesse Glover, an African-American, became Bruce's first student and assistant instructor. Taki Kimura, a Japanese-American who faced deep discrimination after World War II, became one of Bruce's most trusted protégés. For Bruce, martial arts weren't bound by culture. They were a means of liberation, self-respect, and connection. That same spirit followed him to Hollywood, where the industry routinely pigeonholed Asian characters into subservient or comedic roles. Bruce rejected scripts that leaned on stereotypes, even if it meant walking away from lucrative offers. His big break came in The Green Hornet, where his portrayal of Kato changed how audiences saw Asian characters on American TV. He wasn't a sidekick in spirit. He was the show's backbone. In fact, viewers in Asia renamed the series The Kato Show, a homage to his undeniable screen presence. But Bruce's influence stretched far beyond the screen. He trained and formed friendships with people from all walks of life: boxers, dancers, actors, and athletes. Among them was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who not only learned martial arts under Bruce's guidance, but also appeared alongside him in Game of Death. Their bond, forged at a time when America was still wrestling with the civil rights movement, reflected Bruce's deep belief in personal growth through shared discipline, not shared identity. His message was simple but radical: be like water, adaptive, inclusive, and unstoppable. A philosophy beyond the screen. More than his blistering speed or movie stardom, Bruce Lee's true legacy lies in the philosophy that challenged people to rethink not just how they fought, but how they lived. At the height of his fame, he offered something far deeper than physical technique, a way of being that valued self-discovery over imitation, flexibility over rigidity, and authenticity above all else. By the early 1970s, Bruce had grown disillusioned with the limitations of traditional martial arts. In his 1971 Black Belt magazine interview, he introduced the world to Jeet Kune Do, not just a fighting style, but a philosophy. It blended Wing Chun's close-range efficiency with boxing's mobility and the spontaneity of fencing. But more than its physical elements, Jeet Kune Do was a call to abandon strict systems, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own, he said. That single line became a mantra not only for martial artists, but for anyone seeking their own path in a world full of rigid expectations. This mindset carried into Bruce's approach to fitness, long before the world caught on. He didn't train to look strong, he trained to be strong, mixing weight training, cardio, flexibility, and speed drills. He created a program that looked more like today's MMA conditioning than anything available at the time. He tracked his workouts obsessively and understood anatomy on a level few athletes did. What made his routine revolutionary wasn't just its intensity, it was how it reflected his belief in constant growth and adaptability. But perhaps the clearest expression of his thinking came through one of his most quoted lines: "Be like water, my friend." To Bruce, water was the ideal form, shapeless, responsive, yet powerful. It could flow or crash. It adjusted without losing its essence. That principle applied far beyond combat. It became a life lesson on how to handle adversity, identity, and change. Bruce was a voracious reader, and his personal library held everything from Western philosophy to Chinese classics. He scribbled notes in the margins, not as a student passively absorbing knowledge, but as a thinker shaping it into something personal. His teachings encouraged others to do the same, to question, to refine, and to evolve. Now, with his Seattle tomb scheduled to be opened after more than 5 decades, curiosity grows about what writings or artifacts might emerge, clues to a mind that reshaped not just martial arts, but the very idea of what it means to live with purpose. The tragic loss of Brandon Lee. Few stories in Hollywood are as haunting as the Lee families, where history didn't just repeat itself, it deepened the sorrow. 2 decades after Bruce Lee's shocking death in 1973, his only son, Brandon Lee, met a similarly untimely and eerie end. Both men, gifted and on the cusp of greatness, were taken far too soon. Their shared tragedy has come to symbolize the fragility of promise and the weight of legacy. Born in 1965, Brandon Lee inherited not only his father's name, but the expectations that came with it. Yet those who knew him say he never chased Bruce's shadow. He trained in martial arts under the guidance of close family friends and teachers. But Brandon's goal was to be his own man, one who respected the past without being consumed by it.
Almost a piece of his own personality.
In films like Showdown in Little Tokyo and Rapid Fire, he began to step into his own light, displaying not just physical precision, but a commanding screen presence. Critics noted his range, charisma, and emotional depth, traits that would fully come to life in The Crow, a role poised to be his breakthrough. That breakthrough never came. On March 31, 1993, while filming in Wilmington, North Carolina, a prop gun was accidentally loaded with a live round. During a scene where his character was supposed to be shot, the weapon fired for real, striking Brandon in the abdomen. Despite emergency surgery, he died hours later at the age of 28. The official investigation by the North Carolina Occupational Safety and Health Administration confirmed that the tragedy was due to negligence and poor oversight on set. The loss stunned the film industry and devastated fans who had watched Brandon rise with quiet determination. His funeral was held in Seattle, and in a deeply symbolic gesture, he was buried beside his father at Lakeview Cemetery. 2 lives, 2 legacies, and now 2 gravestones side by side, one representing a man who changed the world, the other a son who might have. Over the years, the shared gravesite has become a place of pilgrimage where people leave flowers, letters, and martial arts memorabilia in tribute to both father and son. For 52 years, the tomb held its silence, an enduring monument to ambition, loss, and love. This powerful story of ambition, love, and loss deserves to be heard. Share it with a friend who would appreciate the legacy left behind by Bruce and Brandon Lee. The decision to open the tomb. Few resting places in modern history have held such a powerful grip on public imagination as Bruce Lee's tomb in Seattle. For over 5 decades, it stood untouched, a monument to one of the most influential figures in martial arts and cinema, and a quiet sanctuary for fans from around the world. But in early 2025, that silence was set to be respectfully broken. The city of Seattle, prompted by long-term preservation concerns, made the unprecedented decision to unseal the tomb for maintenance. The announcement immediately sparked a wave of emotions: reverence, curiosity, and apprehension. City officials first approached Linda Lee Cadwell, Bruce's widow, with a carefully prepared proposal to assess and restore the aging tomb's structural integrity. According to records released by the Seattle Department of Historic Preservation, the site had withstood 5 decades of Pacific Northwest weather, but now required attention to ensure it would last another 50 years. For Linda, the decision wasn't easy. In a rare public statement to the Seattle Times, she admitted to deep hesitation, saying the tomb had always been more than stone and soil. It was sacred ground. Still, she gave her blessing, moved by the thought that maintaining the site was a way to honor Bruce's legacy, not disturb it. Planning the preservation involved both advanced technology and a deep sense of cultural responsibility. Engineers installed a climate-controlled enclosure to prevent moisture damage during the process. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the site to guide the team before any physical steps were taken. Reports confirmed the use of non-invasive methods to protect what lay inside, treating the effort more like an archaeological project than simple maintenance. Security around Lakeview Cemetery intensified in the weeks leading up to the opening. A specialized firm was hired to keep the perimeter secure while allowing for ceremonial access. Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter, worked closely with Buddhist monks to arrange rituals that honored her father's heritage before any work began. These ceremonies, shared through local media and community organizations, underscored the spiritual weight of the event. Linda also contributed handwritten notes and construction documents from 1973, which gave preservationists critical insight into the original layout and contents of the tomb. As preparations neared completion, global attention surged. What would be found after 52 years of silence? Letters, personal artifacts, new writings? No one could say for certain, but one thing was clear. The decision to open Bruce Lee's tomb was more than an act of preservation. It was an invitation to revisit a legacy still unfolding. The opening unfolds. What was meant to be a straightforward preservation effort quickly became a defining moment in the ongoing story of Bruce Lee's legacy. On a quiet morning in 2025, with the world quietly watching, the tomb that had remained sealed for more than half a century was finally opened. It wasn't the engineering or the technology that captured hearts, it was the weight of history. For the first time since 1973, the final resting place of Bruce Lee was no longer just a symbol. It had become a living chapter, unfolding in real time. The operation began as Buddhist monks gathered at Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle, performing a traditional ceremony at sunrise. Their chants echoed softly across the site, offering spiritual grounding before a single tool was lifted. Shannon Lee, standing among them, bore the presence of both daughter and guardian, anchoring the moment with quiet dignity. These rituals, coordinated with local cultural organizations, honored Bruce's heritage and set the tone for the hours ahead. This would not be treated as excavation, but as reverent stewardship. Inside the controlled work zone, a specialized preservation team got to work. Every instrument was sterilized. Every step was mapped out in advance. The granite seal, carved with Bruce's guiding words and weathered by decades of seasons, was the first barrier. As it was gradually removed, a mix of reverence and tension settled over the team. Beneath it lay a complex series of protective layers, designed in 1973 to preserve not only Bruce's remains, but any objects placed alongside him. Their durability spoke volumes about the foresight of that original design. The preservation crew advanced with deliberate precision, using low-heat lighting systems and real-time environmental monitoring to avoid even the slightest damage. Each layer told its own story: seals that hadn't been touched in 52 years, materials that had withstood the silent test of time. Watching nearby, Linda Lee Cadwell provided insights that only she could. She explained the significance of every layer, every compartment. From incense compartments drawn from Chinese burial customs to vacuum-sealed chambers intended to house personal artifacts, each detail reflected Bruce's unique identity, a man equally grounded in ancient tradition and modern thinking. As the final protective casing was reached, anticipation hung in the air like a held breath. The team halted briefly, reviewing their notes and scanning the space one last time. This was the threshold. Behind the last seal could lie untouched memories, handwritten notes, or items that Bruce had chosen as his final companions. Whatever was there, it would not just be viewed, it would be felt. And so, in a quiet corner of Seattle, with the past carefully peeled back layer by layer, the world stood on the edge of discovery, ready to see what remained hidden behind the stone all these years, and what new pieces of Bruce Lee's life might finally step into the light. Treasures preserved in time. The moment the tomb's final seal was lifted, it wasn't what the team saw that struck them first. It was what they felt. Preserved beneath the stone for over 5 decades, the air inside Bruce Lee's burial chamber carried not just the scent of sandalwood, but the overwhelming presence of a life frozen in time. Everything within had been placed with such intention and preserved with such care that stepping inside felt less like opening a tomb and more like stepping directly into 1973. What truly set this tomb apart wasn't its size or grandeur, but the incredible condition of the artifacts it held. While most burial sites of its era show signs of inevitable decay, Bruce Lee's resting place defied time. Silks draped around the chamber, chosen for their traditional symbolism, still held a faint shimmer. The wooden fixtures showed minimal signs of aging, a result of combining ancient Chinese preservation techniques with modern sealing methods, an approach well documented in Linda Lee Cadwell's original burial notes. Experts consulted by the Lee family were stunned by how well the tomb had resisted moisture, pests, and the slow breakdown of organic materials. Then came the personal items, each one a window into Bruce's world. A pair of nunchaku, unmistakably linked to his legendary screen presence, lay carefully encased in a sealed compartment. Their lacquered finish remained untouched by age, and Shannon Lee confirmed in a 2025 interview that they were part of a private collection Bruce had set aside during the filming of Enter the Dragon. Just inches away, a Wing Chun training manual, dog-eared and wrapped in silk, was discovered. Flipping through its pages, the team found Bruce's notes scribbled in both Chinese and English. The handwriting, though faded slightly, was unmistakably his. These weren't just technical corrections or practice drills, they were reflections, short lines about movement, discipline, identity, and the fusion of tradition with innovation. It was part textbook, part philosophical journal. Even the more intimate objects, folded family photographs, a jade amulet meant to protect the soul, and a weathered envelope marked simply for Shannon, were untouched, exactly as they had been placed during the original ceremony. The burial records Linda had kept in 1973 proved vital in verifying the authenticity and placement of each item. For the preservation team, these finds turned the site from a historical project into a deeply human experience. As news of the discovery reached the public, the world's attention turned toward what else might lie within. There were whispers, unconfirmed but impossible to ignore, of personal letters or final writings hidden deeper in the tomb. What began as a conservation effort had quickly transformed into something far more profound, a rare, intimate encounter with the inner world of Bruce Lee. And while the artifacts spoke volumes, it was clear that the tomb still held stories yet untold. A final message from Bruce. What began as a preservation effort quickly shifted into something far more intimate when the team uncovered what may be the most personal artifact of all. A sealed letter handwritten by Bruce Lee himself. Tucked inside a lacquered wooden box marked with a dragon emblem, the envelope bore the unmistakable impression of red wax, still intact after more than 50 years. That wax seal, intricately embossed with intertwined dragons, stopped the entire team in their tracks. This was no ordinary keepsake. It was something deliberately placed, deliberately hidden, and now finally revealed. The decision to open the envelope was not made lightly. According to protocols outlined in the 2025 preservation log, any personal item bearing a seal had to be approached with the utmost care. After documentation, the seal was gently broken, revealing a folded sheet of thick parchment. The handwriting, fluid and familiar, left no doubt. It was Bruce's. Dated just days before his passing in July 1973, the letter wasn't addressed to any individual. Instead, it opened with a universal salutation, "To those who carry my vision." What followed wasn't a farewell. It was a challenge, a message written for anyone willing to listen, regardless of era. In the letter, Bruce urged readers to reject imitation and embrace personal truth. "The obstacles you face are not solid. They are illusions shaped by fear," he wrote. "Be water, resilient, adaptable, and without limits. Don't follow me. Find your own path and walk it without apology." His words echoed many of his earlier teachings, but something about this message felt distilled, final, and meant to last. Present at the reading was Linda Lee Caldwell, who quietly confirmed that the tone and phrasing matched the notes Bruce had once written her in private. For her, this was not a surprise. It was validation. Shannon Lee, also in attendance, called it a final gift from her father. In a statement later shared with the international press, she described the letter as his voice, reaching across time to remind us not who he was, but who we can become. The letter ignited global conversation. Martial artists quoted its lines in training halls, philosophers debated its meaning, fans shared it as a digital mantra for resilience. It was studied not as a historical footnote, but as a living philosophy. More than half a century after his death, Bruce Lee was once again speaking directly to the world. As the preservation team completed their work and sealed the tomb, they left behind not just a site of memory, but a message for the future. That letter, discovered in silence and shared with the world, underscored what Bruce Lee always believed, that a person's legacy isn't written in stone, but in the way others carry forward the spark they left behind. Bruce's final words weren't a goodbye. They were a call to action. For more untold stories and powerful moments like this, make sure to subscribe and keep the spirit alive. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.